Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our policy subcommittee meeting. Today is March 12th, and I will call the meeting to order at 5:01. We have our board members present. We have Ashley Goyas, we have Diana Carpio, and we have Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig, along with two cabinet members, Ralph Valenzizi and Robert Pennington. We'll move forward to the next item, which is the approval of our minutes. Did everyone get a chance to review?
Yes.
Minutes. Okay. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion.
I second.
Seconded by Mary Ellen. All in favor?
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't there.
So we have Diana and Mary Ellen all in favor, and Ashley is abstaining. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and next I will allow Ralph to take the floor to introduce to us the two policies we will be talking about today, and which one he is leading, and also which one Robert will be explaining.
Okay, sounds good. And Jasmine, we didn't have any public comment, just for the record
Okay.
too. So
okay, no public comment. Thank you.
Great. And good evening, board members. It's great to see everybody again tonight. Tonight we actually have two policies that we'll be covering. One which is brand new, and it's something that every district needs to have in place for their graduating class of 2027. Mr. Pennington will be talking about that, and it's talking around the idea of like us, our efforts towards completing the FAFSA. The second policy that we'll be talking about tonight is really around student records, and it's just an update. This is something that we already have in place. There was some minor language changes in this, and I'll explain what those are myself. Just so that Mr. Pennington can have his night back to him, we'll let we'll let Mr. Pennington go first with the FAFSA explanation, and I will pull that up for you, Rob, right now.
That'd be great. Thank you. Good evening, board members. So a new policy that has come to us from the state level is centered around the FAFSA completion. And so starting with the graduating class of 2027, we as a district, we know that FAFSA is an important step to post-secondary education. And so if you were to go to I'm going to say the second line item, FAFSA graduation requirements, this is the requirements that are coming, and that is that all students in that class will either have one of three things done. One, completed a FAFSA. Two, it was for students without legal immigration status, completed and submitted an application for financial aid. Or step three is that they can complete a waiver. And so that is three places, because I know that there are families who will say, I'm not completing a FAFSA. And so there is that piece around signing the waiver around the FAFSA. And then it's by March of each school year that we are able to then complete a waiver for a student or family who has not. So if we have tried to reach out to a family and we haven't gotten a response, the school district can then complete the waiver for this requirement. There's a whole section on confidentiality, talking about like non-public record. And then we have some work that we have to do as a district to meet this requirement. I think it goes into the next portion. Ralph, if you can scroll down.
Yeah, down to the regulation, sure.
Yep. Okay, so here we are. So the first part is we have to have a FAFSA task force. We have to track data from such students regarding FAFSA completion, including date of completion. So this is just going to be another piece that we are going to have to track and keep track of. We will have FAFSA coaches that are assigned to caseloads of students to assist in completing the FAFSA. And so under that third bullet point, as a district, we have two options. And our two options are to, like, if you look, they're very similar. For us, I believe the alternative option would be the better bullet point to add in, and that is that we'll have FAFSA coaches assigned to a caseload of students to assist students in completing the FAFSA, monitor their completion, and make a good effort to contact students graduating 2027 and beyond, or such students' parents, guardians about completing the FAFSA. And so I think that that piece, that is an, like, if you were to look, that first piece is just around completing them. But I think that onus of that we are actively connecting with families around the completion or the waiver, I think is an important step for us. And then provide incentives for students who have completed. We as a district at our high schools, we have assistant principals who've done a lot of work with RISE around FAFSA completion. We've had FAFSA parties. And so there has been a great effort. I know Brian McMahon 2 years ago was honored at the state level for their FAFSA completion rates. And so this is like I said, it is something that is going to be new for us as a district and something we're going to have to track and something that we're going to have to make sure that we are working with our students and families around.
And Rob, if I can just add in real quick. So the tonight when for board approval, it's the policy portion of this. As we always do with regulations, we always bring them up if there's any changes or an addition to regulation. For it's not a vote that you have to do for that, just so you're aware of it, and if there's any suggestions. And so this section piece where you see the second part with the alternative is actually part of the regulation, and the wording that we'd like to use is the as Mr. Pennington mentioned, it's the alternative option there. Um, these are suggestions, like the items that are there about how we help to track FAFSA. And the nice thing about that, the reason it's in the regulation is, as time goes on, if we think that there's better strategies or things we need to kind of modify, we can make those modifications quickly for our kids.
And if you look, some of the regulation piece does connect right back to the policy. So that is one of the key pieces, is that there are things that directly connect back. Questions around the policy?
Not this particular section, but
You want to scroll up to the top?
Yeah.
no, just in general, you know how you said Brian McMahon did a really great job. Are we trying to duplicate that at the other high schools?
So they each are doing FAFSA work and part of our partnership with RISE. This is, and that was part of the state effort, I think, to increase FAFSA completion. And so now as we go into next year, it's just we're going to have a more formal process because of the new state policy. And so the state policy is to work with our families to encourage them to complete the FAFSA. But now, as you can see, we actually have to go through each one of our students and monitor and track and make sure that, like, this was not something that was a requirement of a school district. It was families would make decisions around the FAFSA and we would work to support the families. But now it is becoming a new requirement of the district around FAFSA completion.
Thank you.
A question on the difference between the application and the FAFSA.
That is the application.
But didn't you say there were three choices?
There are
And
three choices. Oh, are you talking about the second choice for
That's what I'm
students
talking about.
without legal immigration status. So there is an application for financial aid. So
Yeah,
for certain universities. And so well, they may not complete the FAFSA. We work with them to then complete an application for financial aid.
I see. I see the difference. And
Financial aid would be to this specific university,
okay, not just a general
not
one.
not the federal application for
And
assistance.
so this sounds reasonable with the waiver uh, there, because of course there are parents that would choose not to give all their information.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sounds reasonable.
absolutely.
And so all the, I mean, I know we have many students who going to a university is not necessarily their plan. They all we're trying to have that touch point with all of them to complete that waiver that they're not completing the FAFSA.
Yes,
This is a lot of work.
yes.
Mhm.
I think there's a phrase that we talk about, unfunded mandate.
Mhm.
Uh,
Unfunded
What
mandate.
was the what was the state's, do we know kind of what prompted the state to do this policy?
so if you were to go up to the top,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. The thought process, I believe, is that like we know like it's an important step for post-secondary, and so if families are applying for the FAFSA, then there's a stronger opportunity, I think, for students to go to post-secondary education. Whereas some families may not know about the FAFSA and don't complete the FAFSA, and then they may not go that route. I just I think that it's something that we have worked to support our families and our students and families, but I just think that like the data tracking, the outreach, and there are certain things that can like they do give us some leeway around so that like if we have tried to work with a family or connect with a family where the district can just sign off and say, no, they're not completing it. I think it's by
Mhm.
March 15th. So,
Yeah.
but it is just, there is a level of tracking and monitoring that we are going to have to do.
Yeah. And like I said, it's actually not even the idea of putting this in place, it's a state regulation that we really need to have in place.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, no, I know that the state is saying we have to. It just, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of work, and I don't know. I don't want anyone to
Mhm.
have any negative feelings about not going post-secondary because there's so
Well,
many options.
especially
But
as we are working with our families around workforce development
yeah,
opportunities
Mhm.
Right.
and talking to them about other pathways and
Mhm.
like there are many opportunities for students post
Yeah,
high school.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I think that, when this initially was starting to move forward, was actually a number of years ago, and since then, there's been a lot more of a focus, even at the state level, around workforce development. So
Correct.
I
You're
mean, there
correct.
could
Th
potentially be changes down the road too. So
this actually came out a few years ago with an implementation of 2027.
Mhm.
I see.
Okay, and here we are.
And here we are.
yep.
Here we are approaching. And so this is going to be like somewhat of a added role to the school. The school counselors
It's
are
it's going to be an added checkpoint that we're
checkpoint.
going to have to work with our school counselors and our like I said, each school almost has like an assistant principal who does work around FAFSA.
yeah,
Okay.
So
and it's the
that AP will kind of oversee school counselors getting doing.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's usually it's the data tracking because I mean I do know like you mentioned,
Mhm.
Rob, just for clarification, we really do a lot to try and help our students
We do.
with it
Yeah.
now, but it's the additional data tracking now that's the additional.
Correct. It's not something that we've quote unquote tracked in the way that we're going to have to. And Carol Wilshire-Toth will be working with our counselors around setting up that type of a system.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for the update.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Is that it
So,
for me, Mr. Valenzusi? Is that it for
yeah,
me?
I think so. If there's no more questions, I guess then the question, Jasmine, would be just do you want to bring both to a vote at the end, or would you rather just vote on this right now on what?
You
Oh,
want to vote now? That's fine. Okay. So may I have a motion to vote to bring this new regulation to the full board for approval?
So moved.
Thanks, Ashley. Seconded by Mary Ellen. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Mary Ellen? Yes?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get my screen.
It's
But
okay.
yes,
Okay. Thank
here I
you.
am. Here I am.
That was passed unanimously. So the second
great.
policy, Ralph,
Yes, definitely. And thank you, Mr. Pennington, for
yes,
jumping
thanks
in.
so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
Rob.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All
Rob.
right.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
So our next policy tonight is actually just an update. It's something that we have in place
Mhm.
right now. And you've probably heard the term FERPA, which is really our so the FERPA actually stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's something that allows our families, rights to student educational records, and it allows for us how parents can access certain records. It explains how we keep control of our certain records, and it also just talks about student data privacy. The policy itself is quite long, and it's been in place for many, many years. So definitions, a lot of those pieces have not changed. So what I wanted to do tonight was just explain the one update that's there. So I'm going to go to a small little PowerPoint presentation to explain this. And then also just take about 5 minutes afterwards to really explain the policy itself and some of the components of it so that there's an understanding around this. So let me start so FERPA itself, like I said, has been in place for quite a while. The change that's happening right now with FERPA, and the change to the regulation is up to now, if you were a parent, excuse me, if you are a student and you turned 18 years old, okay, they had rights there was the right to be able to transfer the record from the parent to the student. So the student then has full rights on their records. The change that's happening in the policy is that the district is now permitted, but not required to disclose the records. Excuse me. Let me backtrack with that. At 18, the student has rights to be able to their own records. But if the student was still enrolled with us, the parent still would have access to the educational record. Now, when the student turns 18, the district's permitted, but they're not required to give it to the parent. So that's really the only change with this. We wouldn't change our procedure. If the parent wants it, we can still give it to them. It's permitted. In the past, it was required that the parent would always be able to receive it after 18. And if the student decided for some reason or another that they didn't want to, um, that would be the case. So that's really the only true change in the policy is that it's going from permitted to it's permitted, but it's not required that we hand over the record to the parent. And then there was just some grammatical things that were actually made sure that, like with changes that happen with anything in technology and data, that those terms were correct still for today. Any questions on that change at all? So that's really the only modification to the policy itself. But I thought I'd try to explain real quickly in just a couple of minutes since we have everybody, and I try to use these opportunities to explain what these policies stand for when we do have this committee. FERPA is something that we have to have in place for compliance. So this policy allows us to comply with state and federal laws. Um, just so you know, too, with FERPA, when we do hand out our student handbooks, we are, as a district, to notify parents of their eligibility and what FERPA means, their rights for there's to be able to access student records. So once again, when we send that out in this coming year, we would send it out saying it's permitted and not required, as we mentioned before. Um, and we have to make sure that we actually implement these, which we do as a district. The making sure that we keep our student records um, um, and procedures all in place for all the parties. Um, and once again, this has been practice for us for many, many years. But FERPA itself is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Just so you know what the rights are for parents and students. Um, for parents and students, they have the right to inspect and they can review educational records within 45 days of a calendar request. So if a parent asks for an educational record, we are required to give it to them within 45 days. Um, the parents also have the rights, if they feel like something is inaccurate or misleading, they can put in a written request for an amendment to the record. They have the right to a hearing. If as a district we decide that we don't agree with what with the request from the parent has a right to a hearing to talk about the student's content, and they also have the right to file a complaint afterwards. So once again, these have just been things that are in place, but it is the rights, and these are things that we make sure that parents are supposed to know. At the beginning of the year, we're supposed to annually post this, but it is in our policy itself, and this kind of encompasses a lot of the policy. Any questions at all, or
So the
yeah?
change, are we making this change to the language because of something the state said we had to do, or we're doing it because we feel it's a
No,
good
no,
thing?
it's a requirement. This was given to us by our model policy saying there have been changes in the federal law, which makes it so that we have to make this change.
Okay.
Yes.
And it seems, am I reading it right, that it's giving students over 18 a little more control over their own records, or the
Yeah.
opposite?
They
Like
well
it,
they over 18 they always had the rights to them, but if the student was still enrolled, and let's say, they're a senior, they're older, they're an 18-year-old, parents could ask for the educational record. They then and there was the parent that we were required to give them that educational record. Now, if they're over 18, um, we haven't had these circumstances, but there could be a circumstance where, it's permitted for us to give it to them. There's nothing wrong with us doing it, but we're not required if the student over 18. So the student does have a right to be able to kind of, if maybe there is some kind of situation that, and usually changes like this to a law, to a policy happen because something happened along the way that deemed that there was a need for that kind of a change.
got it. So like if a parent requested it, we would go to the 18-year-old student and say, your parent requested it. Are we permitted to, do you give us permission to release it to them?
Yeah, and usually it would be done in conjunction, yes. So one way or another through that process, it would go through. We are not, but once again, the student, like I said, it is permitted that we do that. We don't have to ask permission as a student, but if something came out of this, could there be a question around it? Yeah, I guess there could be, but we are literally we are permitted. It's not like there's a anything that we'd be doing wrong if a parent asked for it. It's just that in the past, it used to be required. There was no choice. So,
Right.
and when you see some of the reasons, like maybe there could it be that there's a some kind of other issue legally. The student had an arrest, or there's something else that kind of there could be other implications that maybe would impede that from happening. Once again, we haven't had that happen to us as a district, but obviously this is kind of what the change is for.
Ralph,
Um,
are you saying, can you hear me?
yes, yes.
Uh, so rather than um, rather than the 18-year-old making the decision, it's saying that we who are keeping the records can make the decision to give it to the parent, but we're not required to. So
Required.
that means we could say, no, we don't want to. It's just hard for me and maybe Ashley and Diana to imagine, well, what situation would we say we would refuse a parent of the request to see a transcript? It's,
I
I'm trying to imagine it. That's all. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
imagine the situation.
I mean, I'm wondering if there was ever I don't want to say domestic violence, but or something else. There could be other issues that would come up that may create that kind of a situation where that
So,
parent.
we would have to have some information that
Exactly.
in some way it
Exactly.
would be harmful to release that,
Yes.
and not from what the student is saying, but from information we have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it could, that could come from the student too. Once again, this hasn't happened to us. But the fact that it says that it's permitted means that basically what this is saying is that the district is, um, in a sense, I don't want to say like not held liable, but they are covered that they can release it. They're not required to release it. And maybe if I go through the next couple of slides, you can see where there's times where no matter what we do have to release it, it may make a little more sense.
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So the first thing I just wanted to define was really what is an educational record? And when we talk about what is constituted under the umbrella of FERPA, the definition is any information directly related to a student recorded in any manner and maintained by the district. And so that could be a homework assignment that we keep in a Google Drive. That could be testing. That could be their demographic information. Um, the second thing that makes it an educational record is personally identifiable information. So those are the things that we traditionally think of. Your address. We don't keep students' social security numbers. Um, but there's student ID. If we had biometric records, for students, those would actually then be considered also something that's personally identifiable, that we can identify who that student is. Um, Things that are excluded from an educational record are a student's private notes that are just in their own possession. So if a student had a notebook, that's not considered a student record until they hand in the assignment. And if they hand in the assignment that was in their notebook, then that's part of the student record is their work. Um, Things that are also excluded are law enforcement unit records created for law enforcement purposes. Okay. And this one's been there for ages, but peer graded papers before they are recorded by a teacher, because in some cases we have students working with other students. Once that information is shared and it's not your sole property, it's considered an educational record in a public setting. But in many cases, when kids are working together, we have them, grading and working with each other till that's actually becomes an official grade with the teacher. That's not considered part of a public record. So hopefully that helps to define a little bit more about what this type of a record is. There is something that's an exemption, though, from this, and this is stuff that we call directory information. So, directory information is generally not considered harmful or an invasion of a student's privacy when it's disclosed. Um, Categories can include their name, sometimes their address. We usually do not we do not publish that as part of our directory information. An email, um, participation in sports, honors, awards, and grade levels. And you can see that those items are items that would be in something like a yearbook. So those are things that we want to make sure that are considered part of the directory information. Um, Parents do have the ability to say that I don't want my students' information in a yearbook or considered part of that public directory. So once again, we make sure that in student handbooks and stuff, parents are aware of that annually. Um, and there are some limitations. One example of a limitation with this, with the directory piece, is a student can't opt out in many cases to not wear their or carry their student ID because they consider it something that's not eligible for this. They do have to, like I said, there's certain things that just fall outside of that. And there are some items that we can disclose without the parents' approval. So there's a number of different categories that allow us to be able to share student records. One is with what it's called school officials, but it can be partners. Those with a legitimate educational interest, the need to review the record to fulfill professional duties. So an example of this would be our partnership with the RISE network. We sign a student data privacy agreement. We make sure the student data is safe, but they actually, because they're an educational partner, have the ability to be able to look at student records, because if not, we wouldn't be able to generate the dashboard that we do with the RISE network. Um, we don't have to get consent to send a record to a school system where a student is transferring to. As long as we know that they're transferring there and they've requested it, we can just pass off the record to that school so the student can register there. Um, Health and safety. In an emergency where we know it's necessary to protect a student or others, we are allowed to do that. And then if there's ever a legal mandate that's given to us with judicial orders, so in the form of a subpoena, we would have to be able to disclose certain things without consent. One of the last things I just want to talk about is just and this ties back to a policy that we talked about last month, excuse me, which was around records maintenance. That was for adult records. This one actually really just talks specifically about student records, which is where FERPA is. But in case you didn't know, there are categories talking about like how long you have to hold on to records for, and when you can actually remove them. The first category is any of their essential data, which is grades, graduations, immunizations. That is supposed to be kept by a school district for 50 years. Okay. Um, then testing records, health records, anything, those are considered things that we categorize as verified information. Those need to be kept at a minimum 6 years after the student graduates. For special ed, IEPs and evaluations are supposed to also be kept for 6 years after the student leaves the district. And then what we call temporary or short-term records. So in many cases, I mean, permission slips, items that would be something that we'd keep on a record. Those are supposed to be kept for about like I said, depending on the items, 1 to 5 years, so that they're actually available for us to be able to go back to if we needed to. Um, and as we talked about in the last policy meeting, now if these things need to be if these were records that we wanted to get rid of, so let's say it was a verified information after 6 years of graduation, we have boxes of records that we want to be able to dispose of. There's that form that now has to be filled out that we apply to the state. they make sure that they agree with that, and then 2 weeks later we can get rid of that information. So both policies are somewhat tied to each other. They're just procedural. So. And with that, that was really, I just wanted to kind of give everybody kind of a real quick brief overview of what what FERPA is. That there's only just one federally changed piece that talks about the idea of the permission from parents. That we have the ability to be able to hand that off. And just understand a little bit more about what FERPA, what it constitutes and how it works. I don't know if there's any questions at all. I know we talk about FERPA a lot and student data privacy, but it is something that it does take up a lot of time, and we want to make sure that we keep our students' records safe. And I think, first and foremost, I'm actually wondering, just so you know, this is completely in a tangent. We talk a lot about AI now, how those will affect student data records as we move forward. So there is no real legislation around that. It's going to be an iterative process, but it's something that we're really keeping track of at the moment and trying to figure out how we navigate those waters. And as you heard last night in the board meeting, some of the national work that we're doing is making sure that we're following up and making sure that we're kind of ahead of the game with what we're hearing and how do we kind of approach that work so we can be as open with the community so they're aware of it too, because it's one thing that parents ask a lot, at least for me. They ask a lot about how we actually keep student data private. So with that,
Thanks for the slides. That was really helpful, just explaining that all, breaking that down further for us.
Sure.
Mhm.
Great. And thank you. So
You're
I
welcome.
guess that. Mhm.
Mhm.
So I think that sums up my piece for the second one, which is
Okay.
once again, it's a policy that's in place. So it's just looking to make that one language change that we had talked about on that first slide.
Okay, perfect. Can I have a motion to vote to bring the action item for board approval?
Motion.
Motion by Diana, second by Ashley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. That was passed. So we will add those to, the policies that we discussed today at our next business meeting for the full board to vote on.
Sounds great.
Yes. Well,
Great. Thank you.
any other questions from members here? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Ralph
great
and
day.
Rob that jumped off, but okay. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Right.
Motion.
Seconded.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Night,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Night.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Good to see
Take
you.
care.
Thanks
Good
for your
night.
time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Roland.